You guys have been requesting it for months and months. And would you believe if I told you that it finally happened? I went to an indie show, but it was completely unplanned. It was completely impromptu. And it's actually kind of funny how it happened. Long story short, I was buying Tally flowers at a local flower shop for Valentine's Day. And as I was going to leave, the guy behind me was purchasing flowers and he mentioned that he was wrestling across the street and he would have to come back and pick them up or something like that. And that caught my ear and I thought, wrestling, I got to stick around. And when I turned to look at him, he was wearing Roman Reigns head of the table sweatpants. So I was pretty confident immediately that he was talking about this kind of wrestling. But when he was done, I asked hey, you mentioned wrestling. Are you talking like wrestling? And he's like, pro wrestling. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Is that nearby? Is that like right across the street? And he basically says, yeah, every week, Thursday, 7 o'clock. And well, this was on a Thursday at about 5:30. So I went home and I told Tally, hey, you want to go to a local wrestling show? She was immediately down, no surprise, and we were immediately excited. Now, I want to be very clear off the bat. We were on our way there and me and Tally actually discussed this. My expectations were in the gutter. And it's not that I was thinking it was going to be bad, but I think it was just me trying not to overhype it in my head. I was really kind of just thinking okay, this very well could just be maybe 10 dudes that built a ring and their girlfriends in the crowd. I have no idea. I was really preparing myself for this to be just the most jank random. I knew nothing, to be very clear. Never been to an indie show, never heard of this show. And it was taking place in a local trade center, a place where flea market type shops are usually at. So I wasn't even sure how this was possible. I couldn't picture where it could be. Again, no disrespect to indie shows in general, but I just did not know what to expect. So I played it safe and I kept my expectations very low just to make sure I could have a good time no matter what. We pull up, we walk in, and it's like if you ever play a high school sport, there's usually a table right out front of the arena or the football field or whatever you play, and there's usually a mom with one of those boxes that you keep money in, it's got the little latch flips open. It's like a makeshift cashier drawer place to just keep money. And it was just a lady sitting there with the box, and she just kind of looked at me and she smiled. She was super friendly, and I said, I think I'm in the right place. And she's like, for wrestling? And I was like, yeah, that's what I'm here for. Let's go. It was $10 a piece. I made sure to bring cash because, again, didn't know what to expect. And she just points to the side and says, down the hall, there's a big arrow on this little hallway. Take a left and you're there. And I'm like, okay. But this is where the first interesting little bit of information was leaked to me. As I walk down the hall, I see this sign. It immediately catches my eyes because obviously it's got a WWE logo on it. And when I Googled it, this is where I learned a little bit more about the WWE ID system. Apparently they have prospects that they, I really don't even know what they do. I don't know if they just showcase them. I don't know if they help them. I don't know if they move them around. But there was a wrestler that was in this promotion that was going to be featured tonight that was technically a WWE ID prospect. And so immediately I'm thinking that's pretty cool, right? Somebody wrestling in here is being seen or is being watched to some degree by the WWE. And I immediately thought that's pretty cool because this just feels this is in my backyard. The WWE is aware, even to the smallest degree, even if it's just one person keeping an eye on whatever's going on here, somebody at WWE is aware that this is happening, which immediately that took my low expectations and it bumped it up a little bit. I was like, okay, this is kind of cool. Now don't worry, I did get some footage. It's going to be on screen, but I did not want to pull up my phone and just start recording everything as I walked in. I was feeling like a guest. The first few minutes when I first walked in this corner area where all of the wrestling setup was, I didn't want to be that guy. So I took it in. I wasn't recording or taking pictures right away. So I'll just have to describe it to you. When you first walk in, there's a handful of tables that had some merch on them. There wasn't a ton, I don't think, right off the bat. It was hard to tell because the merch area wasn't super well lit, and I think that's because they were more focused on that toward the end of the show. But there was another table with more generic City Championship Wrestling. I can't believe I haven't mentioned it at this point. This promotion was called City Championship Wrestling. This was actually, it's kind of the perfect time to mention it because I didn't know what the name of the promotion was until this point in the story. So I walk past the merch stuff. There's a ring. It's pretty low to the ground, but looks like a pretty normal wrestling ring. Got the name of the promotion on the apron. It looked pretty cool. They had a lot of lights, everything. They were making this feel like a pretty big deal. They were really trying to like really add some ambiance here. It was pretty cool. Two sides of the ring had seats. One side, I believe, had 2 rows. The other side had 3. By the time the show started, there were probably like 30 to 40 people, which was right about where I thought it would be on like the higher end. I was expecting less, to be honest, but yeah, it ended up being pretty much all of those seats were filled, and then there was a few people watching, just kind of standing around. Now, one of the things you'll notice is there is no padding outside of the ring. So I immediately am assuming, they're not going to do anything out here. That's just a tarp. That's a literal tarp, and that's just hard floor under it. There's no way. That's probably not going to, they're probably going to keep this in the ring. And then you'll notice that they have some VIP rope as their barricade instead of actual like barricade of any, like instead of like the metal barricades or anything like that. And now I'm going to be honest with you. This is where I immediately it was kind of love at first sight. Like I hadn't seen any of the wrestling, hadn't seen any of the wrestlers, nothing. I had only sat down in the second row, by the way, closest I've ever sat, but I immediately appreciated what I was seeing. I loved that I was seeing this version of what I love on TV, something that I have only fallen in love with in the last 2 years. And so I was immediately just able to appreciate this makeshift love of the game style setup. Like this felt like this is what we're doing because it's what we have and we want to do it. So we're going to use what we have to accomplish it. So me and Tally are getting kind of excited. I'm not gonna lie to you. It was getting a little bit giddy. I'm like, this is pretty cool. Like this feels tight knit. It feels like it's very, I don't know, I'm struggling to get across this initial feeling, but hopefully it makes more sense throughout the video. If you haven't already, make sure you check out the Patreon. You can join for totally free, and there's free content there every single month. And then if you want daily content from over there, you can always upgrade at any time, or you can just stick with the free stuff. Either way, I appreciate you checking it out. Back to the video. So at about 7 o'clock, there's 2 hosts that kind of come out with microphones as if they're introducing and they're opening the show. It's clearly your, these aren't like your wrestlers. These are your presenters, the ones who kind of move you, your commentators, basically. Now, I didn't catch both their names. That's going to be a theme in a lot of this video. I'm going to try to give you names that I was able to get and the ones I was able to get from this promotion's website. And unfortunately, their website does not have an updated roster. There are definitely wrestlers that I saw in person that were not on this website. But these two do exactly what you would expect from any other wrestling show you've ever seen. They get you hyped up, they welcome you to the show, and they say, let's quit dicking around, let's bring out such and such. So to kick off the show, out comes this, like, I don't know, I will call it their bloodline. I mean, one of them was acknowledging he threw a 1-up, and it kind of felt like this was this show's like main big boy faction. Like this was the faction that thinks they run the show. Now on their website, there is a faction that shows 3 of the people in the footage that is on your screen or that I just showed listed as New Albania. But the picture is also missing 2 other people from the video and from that group, so I don't know if that has changed. So as far as I am aware, this group featured Andre Kabashi, Big Gun Jay Abrams, Iron X, and Midas. Now this was cool because it very much, I didn't expect this, to be honest. I kind of thought that this was going to be like the show starts, match 1, match 2, match 3. I didn't expect that there would be like promos. I didn't expect that there would be like active storylines. I just didn't. I don't know why. I just, for some reason, I was not sure what to expect. And what was really cool, these guys make their way to the ring, they take the microphone and they start calling people out. They're definitely doing what you would expect in a typical like WWE or even sometimes an AEW show, where it starts with a promo that's clearly setting up a match later in the night. And so that was really effective for someone who was sitting down for the first time, never seeing any of these folks before, and getting an idea of what to expect. Like I could immediately pick up on that these guys were pissed at these other guys and they want to have a match with these other guys later in the night. And so getting me immediately invested in kind of getting an idea of what's to come tonight right out of the gate, I feel like was pretty effective. And I really want to highlight the fact that the confidence of these wrestlers was just higher also than what I expected. They were very comfortable. I guess when I pictured it, I was picturing it to be a little bit more of like, because we already see people who are on TV, like on WWE or AEW, TNA, New Japan. Like there's definitely some promos that feel kind of high school playish, and it feels like that's not their strength. So I assumed that you bring it down to the indie level and these guys are going to be not confident at all and maybe kind of struggling. These dudes were going out here and doing this like they've been doing it for 20 years, which who knows, they might have been. That, I guess being in the indie show doesn't necessarily mean that you're new, but they were cooking. Like they were actually, like there's a couple that maybe didn't get to say as much or they only had a line or two, but the dudes that were really holding the mic and kind of carrying the flow of the conversation, the flow of the promo, I was very, very impressed. Now, this promo led into our first match of the night, and the first match was, I believe they call it an elimination gauntlet match, and I believe that this was for a title that they were actually debuting that night. Now, I didn't catch the name of the actual title. It might be somewhere in the footage, but I don't know. I remember now. It was called the All Media Championship. Brand new title. It was pretty cool. But it's a new title that was being awarded to whoever wins this elimination match. And honestly, it was really kind of like Rumble style. They would come out every couple minutes, and to be eliminated, you had to be thrown over the top rope. The top rope onto the floor, where we said earlier was just tarp. Now, granted, this ring a little bit lower to the ground, but we're still talking just hard floor. Oh, and I forgot to mention that one of the stipulations of this match is that every wrestler could bring a weapon of their choosing. So now we're seeing our first little bit of indie wrestling action, and immediately right off the bat, I'm noticing this is loud. Like this is kind of a lower ceiling. It's a smaller room, and every hit on this mat is just loud. It sounds like it hurts. As the wrestlers started to get eliminated, this is where it was like, oh, once again, kind of foreshadowed this earlier, this floor is hard. It's just a tarp. There's no padding whatsoever. And this turned out to be extremely true, because after the match actually ended, they did come over the microphone. One of the hosts said that one of the people that was thrown out hurt their ankle and was taken to a nearby medical facility, and they would not be returning to the show tonight. Now, was that real? Did I get worked? I don't know, but I felt bad for the guy. So I don't know if he was actually hurt. That sucks, but also totally understandable. That looked like it would really hurt. The fans were kind of what I did expect, but actually surpassed those already higher expectations. My assumption would be that a show like this is only going to have pretty strong wrestling fans, right? These are not going to be super casual people that watch wrestling once in a while. These are going to be fans that are diehard wrestling fans. They're wanting as much wrestling as they can get throughout the week. So unsurprisingly, these fans were loud. Now, I'm fully aware that a smaller venue is going to make any crowd of people seem louder. That's beside the point. It wasn't about the literal volume. It was about the activeness of this crowd. They were reacting to everything. They were doing chants. They were doing "This is awesome" chants. They were doing all of the wrestlers like special chants, like whatever their personalized chants might be. They were booing heels. They were active and part of it. Best way I can explain it is, if you've ever been to a wrestling show, you know how there's usually that one section, there's that one spot that's a little bit louder. Maybe that's the spot where a lot of the chants actually start from. It's like if you took that section of people and you dropped them in a show and they were the only fans there. Being a part of that was cool. And me and Tally got in on chants whenever we could. It was actually surprising how comfortable I felt in this environment that quickly. I definitely would have expected, if you would have asked me ahead of time, I would have thought I would have been pretty reserved and kept to myself, but there were definitely moments where you get caught up in the action and you just can't help but yell with everybody else. And it was a blast. Now, speaking of these personalized faction chants, there may have been one that I kind of got sucked into pretty quickly, and I have to credit it to the charisma of the tag team. This was the tag team of Jay Leo and Don Tone, better known as Those Effin' Guys. I can safely say that for myself and Tally, these were the guys that, well, the effing guys that when we walked away from the show, it's what we remembered the most. When they were on the mic, they were memorable. They took control. It was charismatic. It was confident. And the same could be said in their match. Now, remember earlier I said this like bloodline type looking faction comes out and they call out some dudes, or they're I don't remember if it was a call out, or I don't remember. It was my first like 30 seconds of watching it, so maybe I didn't perfectly grasp everything. But it was to face these guys later in the show, because that's who they ended up facing. This match was fire. It was fun. It was all outside the ring. There was even a point where one of them got like dropped on the chairs. Like it was kind of like in some of those New Japan matches that we watch on the Patreon, where they go out and they like clear the chairs, and they throw someone into the chairs. Yeah, that literally happened. They walked out there, they said move, and one of them got dropped on the front row seats, and that it was cool. Like this stuff just feels and sounds like it hurts so much more when you are just right there and it's just on like normal floor, normal like random chairs. Like none of this was like padded. This was just them putting their bodies on the line and just doing it because they want to do it and they love it. Like you could genuinely tell when someone is doing something because they want to be there and because they love it. I think a lot of sports fans can agree with that. These guys had that. So they are defending their titles. They successfully defend their titles. And then the host guy comes over and he lets everybody know that they will be defending it again next week against some other tag champions, and it's going to be a champion versus champion match. So I think I'll be going to that this week. Something else that really stuck out to me in like this type of environment, I think anybody can relate to this if you've ever done any sort of public speaking. You'd notice that when you're speaking in front of a crowd, if there's kind of a murmur in the crowd and then that murmur like stops and it becomes very quiet while you're speaking, it can feel awkward. It can feel like, oh, am I being boring? Like, did I mess up? There's something about the crowd getting immediately quiet while you're speaking that can maybe throw you off. Now, this is bound to happen during promos in this kind of environment when there's like 30 to 40 people. It's not very hard for there to be a loud cheer and then everybody kind of stops to like take a breath or listen and it gets dead quiet. There's not a whole arena of a random chatter that kind of fills that dead air. I was so impressed by every single person that grabbed a mic during the show and was able to keep powering through those random bits of silence, because as someone seeing it for the first time, I definitely was feeling like, oh, that would be awkward, or ooh, that would throw me off if I just said something and there was a little pop and then it got quiet. Like that would just, I feel like that would throw me off. And I was so impressed by how much they would just keep going and just keep going. And they would bring that crowd right back in. Like, so I was just impressed. And I was just impressed with the matches themselves. The fact that every match did feel pretty unique and you could tell that there was some sort of in-ring storytelling. Now, I will point out that something that was noticeable is the matches were considerably shorter than what I would be used to seeing on TV. This wasn't a bad thing. I'm actually someone who prefers shorter matches, so this was kind of perfect. I'm just kind of ballparking a number here, but it felt like these matches were somewhere in the range of 5 to 10 minutes. Maybe on the lower end of that, but it felt right, especially if just for how quick paced the entire show was. It was about an hour and a half show, if I remember correctly. There was also a moment where I got completely worked, and I think that was one of the reasons why I liked the show so much. I got fooled. At one point, the announcer came out and said that they had a female wrestler who was supposed to have a match that night, but she couldn't because her opponent didn't show up. And so instead, they were going to let her come out and do a promo. So they bring the girl out. Her name was Ray Larson. And immediately I felt so bad because she's clearly in her ring gear. She clearly showed up to wrestle. And I just felt bad that my assumption at this point is maybe there's not very many women wrestlers at this promotion, so there's no one to fill in. And so if her opponent didn't show up, she's kind of out of luck. And so they start doing a little interview, and while she's doing it, some other guy comes out. The other guy comes out and takes control of the interview and starts spewing like, oh, she's just another delusional woman. And then he points to the crowd that are booing him and saying, oh, you guys are just a bunch of delusional women too. And so now he's getting this immediate crowd heat. And so he's going, and then finally Ray slaps the hell out of him. And so that gets a big pop out of me. It gets a pop out of the crowd. It was like right next to me. And then she drags him over to the ring, chucks him in, and then they have a match. So there was just a moment where I was like, oh, I was genuinely feeling bad. I got completely fooled. Granted, that could have still been true, but the fact that they did work me up to a point where I felt bad that she just had to do a promo and didn't even catch that they could swerve me like that. And it was cool that at this level, I was able to, without having any idea who she is, be invested in this moment and get fooled along the way. And then I enjoyed the match. And of course, she kicked the crap out of him, won the match, and it was a cool moment. So then the main event is actually the WWE ID prospect, and he goes by the name of Freedom Ramsey. He is this promotion's champion. He's the heavyweight champion walking out with the title, and he went up against someone by the name of Alex Lynch. So obviously I'm immediately invested in this one because this is a WWE prospect, right? This should be a big deal. I was not expecting him to be coming out in like street clothes, like sweater, sweatpants, and just some regular shoes. He was not like ring gear like everybody else, but I guess that was kind of part of his thing. But as much as I want to sit here and say like this one was definitely a standout, and it was to a certain degree, there's a part of me that isn't sure. I mean, I'm fully willing to admit that it could be a little bit of like a placebo effect, that like I'm being told this is a WWID prospect, so like naturally in my mind maybe I'm like thinking like, oh, that was better. I'm not really sure if that is what's going on here, but there is a part of me that did believe. I mean, the main event was really good, and both the guys looked very good in that match. It was cool to see this up close and personal, and to actually get into a match to that degree. And so maybe it was a little bit of a placebo effect, but if nothing else, the dude was he was doing the little things that I feel like I have been told that pro wrestlers at the higher levels need to make sure to do. His heavy reactions after kickouts, at doing one of what is clearly his finisher, where he like, it's like he's charging up his fist and he yells freedom at the top of his lungs before just doing like a Superman punch. He was very animated, and he was definitely playing it too as if he was performing in front of thousands of people. So I can definitely say that was a noticeable difference, not between everyone, but he was at least doing it to a higher degree than at least some of the other wrestlers. So of course the champion retains, and it was a great match. Once the main event was over, the host of the show comes around and he's talking to the microphone. He just says, all right, that's the end of like the main show. We have a few more matches for you. You're welcome to stay and watch or walk around and check out the merch tables. So it's almost like they kind of had their own version of some like dark matches, which I'm assuming, because these are the ones that didn't have commentary. Did I mention the other matches had commentary, by the way? They had a couple people at a table just kind of talking into like a karaoke speaker kind of thing, where they were doing the commentary live, and where everybody could just hear it there. So these last few matches, like, I don't think they had commentary. I'm assuming they're not associated with any of the like the storylines they have going on. It was probably just a chance for those wrestlers to get to do their thing. Now during this time, I walked around, I checked out some of these merch tables, and it wasn't just merch tables. These were the wrestlers that were in the show over at their table selling their merch. And it's my understanding that independent wrestlers, this is where they make a lot of their money. This is where they are able to do what they do. And that's a great way of supporting your local indie wrestlers, is by buying their individual merch. Obviously by trying to support the promotion as well by going, but if you're trying to support specific wrestlers themselves, it seems like the way to do that is by purchasing their merch, which I did do. While I was there, I actually bought the merch of the wrestler that I met at the flower shop. The one who is the whole reason I was there goes by the name of King Kong Coleman. Tally bought a King Kong Coleman shirt. It has like a gorilla with like blood on his chest and stuff. Like it was a pretty nice shirt. So obviously the first wrestler I'm going to support is going to be the one that even is the reason I was at that show to begin with. But then I headed over to the merch table of that tag team we talked about earlier, TFG, those effing guys. They had a pretty wide variety of stuff, but they were selling some interesting stuff. They were selling some used ring weapons, and they weren't just selling them. When I walked up there, some people bought them, and it sounded like they had been trying to sell them for a while from what I had heard. And these people in front of us bought like a beat up chair that they had like spray painted and signed their names on. And then I think the other one was like a trash can lid. I can't remember 100%, but they bought these ring used weapons, which I thought was pretty cool. I also ended up buying some merch from these guys, but they did direct me to like their website to buy something instead. I could have gotten something at the table, but we saw some stuff. I wanted to get a hat, which I was going to wear for this video, but it's going to be like another 5 days or so before it gets here. I'll wear it in a future video, I promise. Now again, their names are Jay and Don, and I got to stand around and talk to them for a little bit. And I just asked like a couple brief questions about this whole indie setup and everything. Apparently one of the two of them has done all the artwork for their merch, so it really shows like how much these indie wrestlers are supporting themselves, and they have to push themselves. And maybe it's different for different promotions or different wrestlers, but it really seems like at this level, like you need to promote yourself and you need to take care of yourself, or no one else is going to. Of course, I made sure to get a picture of them. I got to hold their title, and there was this funny moment where one of them yelled out like this prompt for their catchphrase. Basically, one of them yells, "What guys?" And the crowd is supposed to yell, "Those effing guys." Those effing guys! And they did that while I was taking a picture of them. They just tried it. It sounded like one of them just wanted to see if the crowd would do it. And they were actually like surprised when the crowd did it. And I could tell there was this moment of, it's like you feel like, wow, you did get over with the crowd. Like the crowd likes what you're doing. And I have to imagine that at this level, especially, it's extremely satisfying. That's got to feel really good to be able to get a small crowd like that to just get behind you that strong, where when there's only like 15 people walking around the merch area, that you can blurt out half your catchphrase and they'll finish it for you. I don't know, I just thought that was a pretty cool moment. Now, if you follow me on X or on YouTube, then you saw I put out a prompt yesterday asking if anybody had any questions about this experience, and there was a few of you that all sent a very similar question regarding asking how was the crowd, or how did the atmosphere feel compared to going to like a WWE show. And I kind of covered it earlier. It was like, it's obviously much smaller, the total volume is lower, but the small environment of the room that we were in, and the fact that you are getting nothing but actual passionate wrestling fans, it was very cool. It did not at all feel like I was just sitting in like a quiet room watching awkward wrestling. It's just wrestling sounds. They were into this, and that's something that is absolutely, I felt at home. I felt like these were my people. Mikey asked, how different was the style of wrestling on the indies compared to a WWE or AEW show? For example, do the wrestlers seem to be more careful, considering there probably wasn't a ringside doctor like there is in major promotions? You would think so, huh? I mean, to a certain degree, maybe. Like, it wasn't super high fly, like there wasn't a bunch of crazy stunts going on, but when it came to the actual impact, hitting each other, the dropping to the mat outside the ring, it felt like anything I was just used to seeing. Like, it really felt like they were trying to sell themselves. They weren't half-assing it. They weren't just giving a little bit. They were really doing it. It was cool. Riley says, my favorite part about some indie shows is when the ceiling may be way too low, so they have to get extra creative. I guess I'm asking if you experienced that. Yes, definitely. There was definitely a lower ceiling, but they were able to get up on the rope and stand, but they weren't so much jumping up and down. It seemed like they were jumping more outward, looked like they were trying to get a little more distance. I could be wrong. Maybe it wasn't as low as it seemed when you're actually there. And that's probably actually why the ring was closer to the ground in general. If it was the normal like WWE height, you for sure would have hit your head. But it seemed like from where I was sitting, it was lowered, and they were kind of jumping slightly upward, but more outward toward their opponent. Just probably so they don't hit their head. Jordan says, how familiar were you with those wrestling on the show, and any stories leading into the matches? How did it affect your enjoyment? I knew nothing. I think I made that pretty clear earlier, so I won't go too deep into that, but I knew absolutely nothing, and it didn't matter at all. They did a actually surprisingly fantastic job of immediately getting me invested, like on impact. Like it didn't feel like I was missing out on too much. G-Rez says, did you get to experience any new chants from an audience that might frequent those local wrestlers that you saw for the first time? Oh, for sure. Like those effing guys chant, there were definitely a lot of booing certain characters. But other than that, it was mostly like your typical. There was your holy crap chants. There was your this is awesome. It was pretty standard chants that you would expect. But yeah, they had a few that were definitely catered to specific factions or wrestlers. Super says, how easy was it to understand who was face and who was heel? Oh, super easy. I don't know if it's easy to do or if these guys just made it look easy, but I mean, just from what they were doing, and one of the wrestlers always mixing in a little bit of dirty tactics, the way they were taunting the crowd, you could tell within the first 30 seconds who was the face and who was the heel. It was well done. Nadia says, did you have any preconceived notions before going that were completely upended in a bad or good way? I mean, it's kind of a funny one, but I was told it was going to smell bad. It didn't. It just didn't. Johnny says, was having more access to the wrestlers a positive or negative for you? I don't really see how it could be a negative, but it was definitely a positive. It was really cool that after watching the show, seeing them over by their own merch tables and selling their stuff and promoting themselves, I thought it was really cool that you could see something, like something, and then right after the show, turn around and support it directly to their face. I thought that was really cool. Talia and I had a blast, and I'm probably going to be going back very soon. I could see me going to this show relatively consistently, and I highly encourage that you check and see if you have a local indie wrestling promotion right in your backyard that you might not even know about. Find a friend that also likes wrestling and just go check it out with them if you're nervous to go by yourself, or if you're confident, just go. I didn't feel at all out of place. There was a little part of me that felt like, oh, if you know what I thought? I thought there was a little part of me that thought it was going to be like me walking into a mom and pop, like hole in the wall type of bar where everybody looks over the shoulder like, who's this guy? Like all the regulars just kind of wonder who you are. It wasn't like that at all. It was just immediately felt welcome, immediately felt like I was at home. I encourage you to check it out. I'm also hoping to do a follow-up video to this one where I talk to an indie wrestler, maybe about what it's like to be an indie wrestler, kind of like the Dijak video, but from the perspective of somebody who is in the indie circuit. So if you're interested in that, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss it. If you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in the comments. I'll do my best to get to them and answer them. Thank you so much to the patrons that are flying up the screen. I will see you in the next video. Bye.